Good morning and welcome to the public meeting on patient-focused drug development for hereditary angioedema. My name is Larissa Lapteva and I'm the Associate Director in the Division of Clinical Evaluation, Pharmacology and Toxicology in the Office of Tissues and Advanced Therapies in the Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research here at the FDA. Today's meeting is the FDA's 24th meeting organized under the Patient-Focused Drug Development Initiative. And as other meetings conducted in the past 5 years, it will center on patients' perspectives on the condition that we're discussing today, hereditary angioedema, its symptoms, its treatments, and the impact of this rare genetic disorder on the lives of people who have it. I would like to thank everyone who is participating today, whether you're here in person or joining us online. Thank you for your willingness to share your stories and your experiences with us. We have a very packed agenda, and without further ado, I would like to invite to the microphone Donna Lipscomb, who is the Director of the Division of Manufacturer's Assistance and Training here in the Office of Communications in CBER, and she will facilitate our meeting today. Donna.
Thank you so much. I really am excited to be here. I'm so excited to meet each and every one of you. My role as facilitator really is going to be to make sure you have a chance to talk about your experiences and to make sure that what you want to know us to hear. That was a good sentence. I like that. Whatever you want us to hear, we're going to make sure we have time. So our agenda, just to go over it really quickly, we have opening remarks, overview of the patient-focused drug development program. We have the discussion topics that Larissa spoke about. There will also be open public comments. That's at the end of the meeting, and you have the ability to, if you also want a time to say something more prepared, you can sign up out at the registration desk if you did not already. There's 30 minutes, and the time will be based on how many people sign up. So let me just, if there's 30 people, everyone gets 1 minute. So, and then we'll have closing remarks, okay? I'm going to turn this. First off, before we get started, I want to introduce, I want the FDA panel to be able to introduce themselves. So we'll start.
Yes, hi, Jonathan Goldsmith. I'm from the Rare Diseases Program in the Office of New Drugs in the Center for Drugs, and I'm glad to be here this morning. Welcome to you all.
Okay, good morning and welcome from me as well. I'm Diane Maloney. I'm the Associate Director for Policy in the Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research.
Good morning and welcome from me as well. I am Tejashri Purohit-Sheth. I am the Division Director for Division of Clinical Evaluation and Pharmacology Toxicology in the Office of Tissues and Advanced Therapies in CBER.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Meghana Chalasani, and I work in the Office of Strategic Programs in the Center for Drugs and Research and Evaluation.
Good morning. I'm Christine Mueller from the Office of Orphan Products Development.
Larissa Lapteva, and I've already introduced myself. Welcome, everyone.
Hi, I'm Teresa Mullen. I direct the Office of Strategic Programs in the FDA Center for Drugs. Good morning.
Thank you so much. I also, I know that some of you were in line at the kiosk for lunch, so at the first break, if you didn't get your lunch pre-ordered, you can do it then, and if you don't get it pre-ordered, you are welcome to go up and order a sandwich. The restrooms are, if you go out past the kiosk and down, make a right and down the hall, you'll see the restrooms there. And I also want to make sure I welcome the people on the webcast. Throughout the process, we will be giving polling questions. For people at the table, you have a really cute little blue clicker that looks a lot like if you were in Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, where you get to click an answer. That's what we're going to ask you to use. And they're marked either 1 or A. That's you click the associated number when you're giving an answer. But the real key is to make sure you see whatever you picked come up red on the display then it has to go away. So if it's a time where it says, pick up to 3, pick as many as you want. If you don't let that go away and you keep clicking, it's only taking the first one. So make sure you click it, see the red, let it go away, and we'll try to make sure we give you enough time to do that. And I think now I'd like to introduce Wilson Bryan.
Good morning. My name is Wilson Bryan, and I work in the Office of Tissues and Advanced Therapies in the Center for Biologics here at the FDA. On behalf of the FDA, I've been asked to make a few opening remarks. What I would like to talk about is education. My own medical education began approximately 40 years ago when I enrolled in medical school. And the opportunity to become a doctor was, for me, a great honor and privilege. In medical school, I learned about many diseases. I don't remember whether I learned about hereditary angioedema in medical school, or whether what I learned about HAE was lost among the many lessons about more common diseases. I think we all know that rare diseases are too often forgotten, overlooked, and neglected. We are fortunate that the scientific community and pharmaceutical companies have developed several treatments for HAE. However, we recognize that the available treatments have severe limitations, that they do not cure the disease, and they have side effects. Today's meeting will serve to advance the development and regulation of new and better treatments for hereditary angioedema. Particularly, what we learn at this meeting will help the FDA to think about how clinical trials should be designed, what endpoints are meaningful to patients, and how to balance benefits and risks when we're thinking about a new product. Which reminds me that while I may have had many brilliant teachers in medical school, most of our education as physicians comes from our patients. At the FDA, patients educate us in many ways, including when they participate in clinical trials, when they serve on advisory committees, and when they and their caregivers participate in meetings like this. So I would like to thank the good folks who organized this meeting, and thank particularly the patients and caregivers, those of you who are making the effort to participate in today's meeting. You are providing my FDA colleagues and me the opportunity and the privilege to continue our education by listening to you. I'll stop there and turn the agenda back over to Donna Lipscomb.
Thank you.
Very good. Good morning. So I'm here at the Center for Drugs. I've worked on the negotiations to authorize the 5th round of the Prescription Drug User Fee Act, in which FDA makes commitments to improve the programs, and we also negotiate a level of funding from industry, which really helps us to hire people and have enough staff to do the work that we do, and in various ways. And part of what we did, and the reason I'm here today, is as as Larissa Lopteva mentioned, this is the final meeting that we're having on Patient Focus. So you're very special because, you know, a lot of people wanted to have meetings and we're like, no, well, this is our last one for this authorization of the user fee program, which ends actually next Saturday. This is the end of the authorization is the end of the fiscal year. So this is the last meeting that we're able to, that FDA is running for this process. And I want to tell you a little bit about why. We, 5 years ago, realized that, and as Brian mentioned, we do have various ways of getting information from patients. One of the main ways we did that before we had this patient-focused drug development initiative set up was to have individuals come in and be patient representatives. And they might come to an advisory committee, or they might just be part of a group that would weigh in. In order for a patient representative to do that, they have to be cleared for conflict of interest because they're weighing in on particular matters that have to do with a particular drug. And that's a very important role to have patients play. But the downside of it is you can only have very few people do it. You have to go through a conflict of interest screening. So we hear from one person, and the person that we're able to get a hold of and join that process may not even have the disease that's being discussed and the condition for which the drug's being developed. So we needed a better way to get to the community of people who have a disease, so to hear from them directly, because we understood that you have a unique perspective. You really have the most critical perspective because the people with the disease can tell us best what it's like to live with the disease, and any benefit that's going to come from a drug they're going to experience. Any burden or harm, they're also going to be the one to experience it. So clearly that's a very important perspective for FDA to understand when we're trying to evaluate a drug and make benefit risk assessments. So we needed this more systematic way to collect the information, so we had this meeting. And we've been doing these meetings for 5 years. This is the 24th meeting that we're having like this. We committed to do at least 20, but we found they're extremely helpful to FDA to better understand what patients are going through and really understand the burdens of the treatments we have. So we understand the treatment burden and treatment disease burden both matter a whole lot. So we've been doing these meetings, and we're very much looking forward to hearing from you today and hearing your perspective. It gives us an enormous amount of insight that we otherwise wouldn't get. We usually hear things that are not in the literature or anywhere else during these meetings, and it's extremely helpful to us. And this is just to quickly show you the wide range of diseases that we have covered in these meetings. And today we're doing hereditary angioedema. So this is something that I know the doctors and the other staff here are really looking forward to hearing what you're going to tell us. And the way this is going to, you're going to be asked about what it's like to live with your disease, what are the symptoms, what are the things that are most bothersome. Then you're going to be asked about, what you're doing to treat and how that's going. With the clickers, you'll be able to answer some of those questions and others. And then between what we hear in the room and the webcast and the docket that'll stay open for a while, so to have people submit any other information they may think of that would be relevant to these questions, we'll put all that together and analyze it and develop a voice of the patient report. That's what follows each of these meetings. It takes us a couple of months at least to get all that information together and carefully look at it and the transcripts from the meeting. And those reports have had extremely, been a very valuable resource to FDA reviewers who go and look at those reports later. They use them to base discussions. We've heard companies go and look at those reports to understand what patients are going through, and it helps to jumpstart their work on maybe developing patient-reported outcome measures or looking at the performance characteristics of the drug they have in development. Patients have told us that these reports are helpful to them because sometimes they never get to really hear what other people are going through too, and it's a chance to hear what other people are going through as well as their own experience. And so they've served in a lot of different ways, and I will tell you that we've learned so much in these meetings that we are proceeding to do a bunch of follow-on work in this next authorization. So happily, the user fee program got reauthorized, so we're going to still be in business on October 1st and doing the reviews of drugs and biologics. But we're also going to be developing other follow-on work to build on what we learned in these meetings. And so I know we'll look forward to hearing what you're going to have to tell us today. And with that, I'll turn it back to Donna. Thank you.
I am really excited to introduce Dr. Ross Pierce. He's a medical officer with the Division of Clinical Evaluation, Pharmacology, and Toxicology in OTAT. Ross.
Good morning. So I'm in the somewhat awkward position of giving background on a medical condition for which most of the people in this room are already very intimately familiar. So my talk's not going to be all-encompassing, so I'm sure there will be things that are important to you that I will not have an opportunity to touch on. So during the discussion topics, particularly the first discussion topic on symptoms and impacts on your life, I'm very excited to have you amplify and fill in the gaps that will inevitably be there in my brief overview. So hereditary angioedema is a condition that involves recurrent attacks of a type of severe swelling called angioedema that may involve various areas of the body, including the gastrointestinal tract, the arms, hands, legs, feet, face, tongue, throat, and our voice box or larynx, and the genitourinary system. These symptoms result in many, many hospitalizations and emergency room visits in the United States every year and worldwide. And swelling of the larynx can be life-threatening due to the risk of suffocation. We can divide the areas of the body that are subject to acute HAE attacks into those involving the mucosa, mucosal attacks, and non-mucosal attacks. So the mucosal attacks would include the rather common gastrointestinal tract attacks, which can show severe abdominal pain, nausea, and vomiting among the symptoms. The oropharynx, so the mouth and throat and larynx, or voice box, where the mouth, tongue, throat swelling, hoarseness, and a type of noisy breathing called stridor, shortness of breath, and turning blue in the worst cases of laryngeal edema can manifest. Genitourinary tracts can involve lower abdominal pain and or genital swelling. And then the non-mucosal attacks involve basically the skin and subcutaneous tissues of the limbs and the face, for example. So these attacks may involve just one of these locations, or they can occur in more than one location, either at the same time or sequentially during the course of one attack. These symptoms typically begin in childhood and worsen during puberty, but the onset time is variable between patients. If untreated attacks of swelling may occur on the average perhaps every 1 to 2 weeks, last perhaps 3 to 4 days without treatment, but this is highly variable between individuals in terms of attack frequency and how long each attack lasts. The triggers for attacks include trauma, stress, infection, exertion, others, and are often not identified at all. So the prevalence of HAE has been thought in the United States to be between 1 in 10,000 to 50,000 individuals. It's estimated that there are perhaps 6,500 individuals in the U.S. who have HAE. This is considered a rare disease. It's resulted in 30,000 emergency room visits per year in the United States. It's inherited from one parent most typically. This is called autosomal dominant inheritance. But it can also occur from spontaneous changes or mutations in the genes responsible for the disorder. We can divide HAE into 3 types in terms of the mechanism. The first involves about 85% of the cases, so it's by far and away the most common. And here we see reduced levels in the blood of a protein called C1 esterase inhibitor, which we abbreviate C1-INH. Type 2, which comprises about 15% of cases, the blood levels of C1-INH are actually in the normal range, but the protein does not function properly. And type 3 is very, very rare in its incidence. But all 3 types have similar symptoms. In terms of mechanisms of the 3 types of HAE, the first 2 types, 1 and 2, have genetic mutations in a gene called the SERPING1 gene. The SERPING1 gene controls the body's production of C1 esterase inhibitor protein, which is a protein that helps the body to control inflammation and also has activity in the blood clotting process or cascade. Without adequate levels of functioning C1 esterase, a protein fragment called a peptide called bradykinin is generated. This bradykinin promotes swelling, edema, by increasing the leakage of fluid from blood vessels into the body tissues. And mutations in the F12 gene are one cause of type 3 HAE. For management of HAE, the most urgent aspect is if the patient has a laryngeal attack, an attack involving the larynx, the voice box. And this can, as I mentioned, can cause asphyxiation, suffocation. So that's the most urgent of aspects of the disease management. But the management of pain and swelling in other attack locations is also very important. Medical management of HAE can be divided into really three categories. I've listed two. The first is medications to prevent or lower the frequency of acute attacks. We call that routine prophylaxis. Medications to treat acute attacks. And the third category would be medications for symptomatic relief of attacks, such as pain relievers and medicines to combat nausea and vomiting. 7 medications are currently FDA approved for either the treatment or the prevention of acute HAE attacks. These include, first of all, the medicines for routine prophylaxis to lower the frequency of attacks, an older medicine called danazol, which is a type of anabolic steroid, an oral androgen taken by mouth. All the other treatments are given by injection, either intravenously or under the skin, sub-Q. Cinryze is an intravenously administered plasma-derived C1-INH. Haegarda is a subcutaneously administered plasma-derived C1-INH, so that's given by injection under the skin. The FDA-approved medications for treatment of acute attacks include Berinert, an intravenously administered plasma-derived C1 esterase inhibitor. So like Cinryze, this is derived from human blood plasma. Kalbitor, whose generic name is ecallantide, a subcutaneously administered plasma kallikrein inhibitor. Firazyr, icatibant, which is a subcutaneously administered bradykinin receptor agonist. In terms of the beneficial effects of some of these therapies, the FDA-approved medications for routine prophylaxis of acute HAE attacks are effective in reducing the number and frequency of attacks, but not necessarily eliminating attacks completely. The FDA-approved medications for the treatment of acute HAE attacks have been shown to be effective in reducing the time to the start of symptom improvement, but complete resolution of attacks still takes time. Current medications for the treatment of acute attacks have to be given under the skin or by vein, as I mentioned. Some of the possible side effects that can be seen with all HAE treatments are listed here in terms of the following three: injection site reactions, redness, swelling, or pain, headache, nausea, fever, and severe allergic reactions can also occur. But certain HAE treatments have rather specific side effects that are unique to that particular product. So the plasma-derived or recombinant C1 esterase inhibitor products, there is understood to be a risk of blood clots occurring either in the arteries or veins. These can be serious. Liver problems can be seen with danazol. Danazol, being an anabolic steroid, is associated with many of the side effects that are seen with the class of anabolic steroid products, including fluid retention, excess hair growth, more of a problem for women perhaps, decreased good cholesterol levels, headaches due to increased pressure in the head, abnormalities in the female fetus if taken during pregnancy. That has a box warning and is very important consideration when prescribing the medication to women of childbearing potential. So, in summary, HAE is a serious disease with recurrent bouts of swelling affecting the gastrointestinal tract, face, mouth, tongue, throat, larynx, windpipe, extremities, and or genitourinary system. The swelling of the larynx can be potentially life-threatening, and the typical HAE patient may have one episode of that in their lifetime, maybe none if they're lucky. Some less fortunate have recurrent attacks of laryngeal edema. The oral medication danazol and intravenous and subcutaneous plasma-derived C1-INH are approved for routine prophylaxis to reduce the frequency of HAE attacks, but attacks may not be completely prevented by these medications. Intravenously administered plasma-derived and recombinant C1-INH, ecallantide, and icatibant are all approved for the treatment of acute HAE attacks, but it depends on the particular product as to whether they're approved for prevention or treatment. Onset of relief is typically rapid. However, complete resolution of symptoms can take hours to potentially even days despite therapy. So what are still the gaps in our knowledge and opportunities for further research? We have to admit we still have limited data on the long-term effects of these medications, especially related to the formation of antibodies as one example. Limited data on how best to determine the optimal dose for an individual patient in practice. Limited information on effects on quality of life, on how currently available treatments influence hospitalization frequencies or mortality. Limited data on how we should or should not combine different treatments together to achieve a better result with patients. Limited data on the use of medications in younger children. Some of the products are approved in adolescents and above, but the data in younger children are very limited. Limited understanding of the aspects that are most important to parents in the current treatment landscape, to patients in the most current treatment landscape. So how can you help today? We're seeking your input from patients and caregivers to better understand the impacts of these symptoms, how they manifest with you, and the challenges that having this condition has, and the impact of the current medications on your condition. We want to know from you your perspective on how you would participate or be hesitant to participate in clinical trials, depending on their design and other considerations. And we'd like patient and caregiver input at today's meeting to help guide the design of future clinical trials in HAE. Here's my contact information and the CBER website, the Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research, of which several of us are a part. The Consumer Affairs Branch and Manufacturers Assistant contacts are there as well. Thank you. And I'll give it back to Donna.
Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit more about the discussion format for us today. These are our discussion topics. I know we've repeated it. We're going to be keeping questions and topics up during the time we have people speaking. So it'll always kind of remind us of what we're talking about at any time. Topic 1 are the effects of HAE on you that matter most to you, your perspective on treatments, and your perspective on participating in clinical trials. So topic 2 and 3 will be this afternoon. Topic 1 is this morning. First, we're going to hear from a panel of patients or caregivers, and the purpose is to set a good foundation for us so we really have a background on what everyone is up against, and the panelists reflect a range of experiences. Then we're going to broaden the dialogue to include patients and patient representatives in the audience, and that's when I'll be walking around with a microphone and giving you a chance to speak. Because time is limited, though, sometimes I'm going to have to cut your comments short. So just want to be aware that we're trying to make sure everyone has an opportunity to speak. So if you feel like your time has been cut short and there was more you wanted to say, you are always welcome to send in comments to the docket. I promise you we read those comments and look at them while we're making decisions. When we ask questions and we come to you, we're going to ask that you state your name, but I do want to say that this gentleman with the headphones on is not listening to Hamilton. He is actually transcribing the meeting, and it's going to be on our web. So I would remind you to give only the information you're comfortable having on the web. So your first name, you don't have to give your last name. But again, it will be public a public record. So I do want to make sure you know that. When we come back after lunch, I'll remind you of that. Again, we'll talk a little bit more about those polling questions. Their purpose is to aid in our discussion, so I'll ask the question, you'll have time to vote. We'll see the responses. People on the web, we're going to give you an opportunity to answer as well, but unfortunately our technology does not allow those two to combine, so we'll kind of comment in the room, and then we'll ask our medical officers that are manning the web to let us know. You can also, web participants, you can also ask questions in the comment box. There are people that are there to answer your questions or to state your comments to the rest of us. So we are asking that patients and patient representatives mainly are the ones to give us comments. And although not every comment that's on the web will be read out loud, it'll be incorporated into our main record. Once again, you can send your comments to the public docket. It's going to be open until November 20th, and you can either share your experience or expand upon something discussed today. Your comments are going to be incorporated in our summary report. Anyone is welcome to comment. And the docket number is FDA 2017N3068, and there are a couple of links. These slides will be on our website, so later if you want to go and see it and have the live link, you're welcome to do that. Okay?
Donna?
Donna? Yes?
This is Barbara. Can we just check and make sure that there aren't any more patients or caregivers that are in the back rows that haven't been able to move up to the tables?
Absolutely. Come on down. Thank you. I would also say I mentioned that you could go out to the kiosk at our first break, but someone who looks closely at our agenda sees that we don't have a break. So what I would suggest is once our panelists have spoken, if you have not had an opportunity to order your lunch, you can kind of quietly go out and get it before there's a big rush for that, okay? At this time, I'd also like to mention we're going to start the polling questions, and people on the web, I think I mentioned this, you're going to see two screens. It'll be very clear when we ask demographics first. And for the patient panelists, what's going to happen is I'm going to ask the questions, then I'm going to invite our panel one to come up and sit, and then after you have your chance of telling your experiences during the rest of the facilitated discussion, you may either stay up here or you may go back to your seats. That's totally up to you, okay? The medical officers on our polling questions are Dr. Ross Pierce and Dr. Stacy Chen in the back. So they're going to be summarizing what's on the web and reporting on it for us. Okay? So in the discussion ground rules, we want to encourage everyone here to contribute to the dialogue. FDA is here to listen, so we're actually not going to say a whole lot towards the end of every topic discussion. We're going to give the panel an opportunity to ask specific questions based on maybe something that they've heard you say, but mostly I don't want you to say, hey, they just sat up there and didn't say a thing. This is our chance to hear from you. We've got our listening ears on. Your views today are your personal opinions, and you are entitled to them, and we want to hear them. And mostly, and so far what I've gathered here, respect is paramount, and we know that that's what we'll get from everybody. So our first question, if you get your clickers out, where do you live? A city, town, suburban area, rural location? My little cheat is that I can see the polling questions numbered, so I feel like 14 responses is probably not a good number. going to give a little more time. This is the time, people on the web, you're now seeing both this question and your polling question open. Okay, I'm going to give everybody one more minute. And when I say minute, I meant second. Okay. Well, 51% are from town or suburban areas with a mix of the city and rural. Our next question. Have you or a loved one been diagnosed? Yes or no? This is the wonderful Bluetooth notice, so it takes a little bit of time from you voting and it coming up here. Okay. Seem to be done at 47, so. Well, who couldn't have seen that coming at a public meeting specifically for this?
So I'll just mention the web participants had 3/4 of them answer no.
Ah, that's interesting.
And on the last question, about 57% were in towns or suburban areas.
Thanks, Russ. I was originally going to come at the very end and summarize it, so I don't want you to think I'm forgetting about the people on the web. I should have said that ahead of time. I apologize. This is a tough one. Female or male? Some of the questions are much more complicated, so I'm like, yay, I can answer. And all words I can say. Okay, 77% female, 23% male. Our next question. What is your age in years? So 20 or younger, 21 to 40, 41 to 60, 61 or greater. And no one's going to see this, so it's not like you're telling your age. If I was taking this, I'd be in B, of course. Okay. As you can see, 50% are in our 41 to 60, but we do have 9% that are 20 or younger, and 24% in our 21 to 40. And how many years elapsed between the time you were experienced symptoms and when you were first diagnosed? Less than 1 year? 1 year or more but less than 3? 3 or more but less than 5? 5 or more but less than 10, or more than 10 years? And that's from symptoms to diagnosis. All right, let's see what we have. Ah, 54%, more than 10 years. That's incredible. You must have really felt like you were losing your mind, or people, one of the things I heard when I was looking online was that people were told that they were crazy or it was in their mind. That must have been horrible for you. I'm so sorry. So for in the room, we have 51% in towns, 98% were diagnosed. The majority of you are female. 58% are 41 to 60, my favorite age category, I'm just saying. Almost in the next one. And the symptoms, more than 10 years, was 54%. For the web, what do we have there? Is it similar, or what's the real changes?
Basically similar. The male to female ratio was exactly 50-50 among our web participants who answered the question. We are still having just a small percentage of all of the registered web participants who are voting on the questions, though. So I do encourage the web participants to vote on the questions for the next session. We have about 40% and change between the ages of 21 and 40, around 50% between 41 and 60, and about 7% who were 61 or greater years of age. And we only had responses in 2 of the categories for the time elapsed since first symptoms and until they were diagnosed. About 60% had the delay in diagnosis between 1 and 3 years. About 40% had symptoms for more than 10 years before they were diagnosed with hereditary angioedema, a fairly horrendous statistic in that polling.
Well, with those demographics under our belt, what we're going to do now is invite our panelists of topic 1 to the podium. It's Kelsey, Shari, Michael, John, and Doug. We asked people who were interested in speaking to speak specifically on these 4 specific questions. Of all of the symptoms you've experienced because of your condition, which have the most impact? Are there specific activities that are important to you that you would like to do but you can't? How have you and your condition and symptoms changed over time, and what worries you most about your condition? So what we're going to ask our speakers, they're going to talk about this. I'm going to leave the discussion questions up for you, and we'll just go down the line to speak. So I'll let you go first, and you just press the button. Mm-hmm.
Good afternoon. My name is Michaelardito, and I'm the older brother of a... All right. Is that better? Yeah. Good? All right. Good afternoon. My name is Michaelardito, and I am the older brother of a kind, adorable, smart, and tenacious 7-year-old girl. My sister Katie was diagnosed with hereditary angioedema the day before her 3rd birthday. Knowing firsthand the devastating effects that this disease has after watching my stepfather suffer the symptoms of HAE, I was heartbroken. On that day, 4 years ago, I became an HAE patient advocate and caregiver. As an advocate and caregiver for my little sister, I find that the impact of HAE, what matters most to her, is drastically different than what matters most to me. From the outside looking in, the symptoms she experiences from a stomach attack seem to have the biggest impact on her life. When she suffers a stomach attack, she screams and cries for hours while vomiting because the pain is so unbearable. Watching her experience this pain and feeling helpless is something I don't even have words to describe. However, when I asked Katie what symptoms matter most to her, she answered without hesitation, when my face swells up, because it makes me look like a monster, and I'm not pretty. I was surprised and sad to hear that the emotional effects of HAE are even more impactful to her than the physical toll. While HAE has taken a physical and emotional toll on Katie, my parents encourage her to participate in everything any other child would participate in. She plays softball, swims, dances, attends school, and plays with her friends. These activities do not make her symptoms worse, but she does miss more than healthy kids her age do. She has missed school, sports games, holidays, and play dates because of swelling. She has been hospitalized for facial and throat swelling, but has also suffered from swelling in her hands and leg. One of the toughest things about HAE is the unknown. Katie can swell without warning and for what seems to be no reason at all. The unpredictable nature of this disease makes it difficult for Katie and for our family to live without fear and without worry. Katie has only had symptoms for 3 years, but I'm aware that HAE tends to get significantly worse, especially for females during puberty. It is my hope that she will have access to less invasive, prophylactic, and life-saving treatments by then. HAE patients in general need more treatment options and easier access to medications. Just days ago, due to a stop in production, we found out that my stepfather has no access to the medication he has been relying on. In many ways, I feel like I'm in a race against time. I so desperately want my sister to live a normal life and to be able to do the things I did when growing up. In conclusion, let's talk about the elephant in the room. My biggest fear is that HAE could take my sister's life. My stepfather was previously intubated after suffering a throat attack, and the thought of that happening to my little sister is agonizing. I also worry that HAE could hold her back from the things she wants to do with her life. And finally, after speaking to her about the symptoms she feels are most impactful, I worry that she will never be able to see herself as beautiful, and that she will always see herself as a monster. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Shari Starr. I hope I can read my own writing. Actually, is this on? Okay, bring it closer. Okay. Yeah, my printer had issues and it's like a font of 5, so if I squint, that's why. I just wanted to thank the FDA for allowing us to come and share our stories. It means a lot to us to be heard. You know, pain is not something that anybody chooses, and it's definitely not something you want to be a part of your life. But I became familiar with pain from a very young age. At 11, my HAE started. Living with pain has been unbearable at times, and my swelling happens throughout my body. I've been swollen in my face, my hands, feet, legs, my throat, my stomach, and intestines, and pretty much anywhere that you can swell, I've been swollen. And you know, like when I have my hands swelling, it's very debilitating, it's painful, and it's really uncomfortable, but probably the worst attack and location I can think of is when it's in my stomach. The pain is unbearable, and if I had to describe it, it almost feels like someone has just like ripped open my insides and is pulling and squeezing my intestines. It lasts for 3 very, very long days, and the only thing that would help is just laying curled up on the bathroom floor and just praying to God that it will end. It took 10 years to get diagnosed, and even after that, I didn't have proper treatments. So it was a lot of years of suffering. And you know, this pain that I'm talking about, I actually am familiar with what it feels like for the general population to know what pain is. You know, I've birthed 2 babies without epidurals, and I've actually even had a kidney stone, and that's no joke. So I do have a high tolerance for pain, and this pain is not something that it's above a 10 on the pain scale of. So during these attacks, you know, like I said, I'm just curled up in the fetal position, and I can't eat, I can't drink. You basically vomit every little bit that's in you. You're just in agony. And eventually these attacks will end in about 3 days, but then you think, okay, this one is done. When is the next one going to happen? And so you live with this constant fear of it looming over you. Can I plan vacation? Can I go to my daughter's recital? When is the next attack going to happen? And so to live life, to dream, to make plans, to have a future, it's hard. So planning things, it was like a 50-50 chance of, okay, I won't get sick. I can go, I can do this. But that does impact your life. It impacts your relationships. It harmed friendships that I had. You know, people were wondering why I always canceled out on them. It impacted me being a good wife and a mom because I spent half of my time in bed. And probably the biggest impact was just how it stopped me from living. I couldn't go to college. I couldn't play sports when I was young. I couldn't even hold down a job. It had control of every part of me. So you say, okay, so 3 attacks. The pain lasts 3 attacks. That's great. It's done with. But like I said, I would get these over and over again. And if I count, I would have about 3 to 5 attacks, sometimes more, a month. So if you add those days up, that's like 9 to 15 days out of the month that I'm sick and that I'm in pain and I can't take care of my family and I can't work. That's practically half of my life that's been affected by HAE. And this is no way to live. I've missed out on a lot, and my family has missed out on a lot because of me. But thankfully, I have been on a new treatment, and it's greatly affected my life. And just to compare the difference, it's like now I can live life without the worry of an HAE attack. And I can go to college, which I'm in nursing school, and I'm living and working and being a good mom and a wife that I never thought was possible. So I am so appreciative for these approved therapies. And having my mom and my daughter also have this condition has made me really passionate about advocating for this community. And I just want to keep striving for better treatments for everybody and more research to be done. So I just want to thank you again for having us and letting me share my story.
Hi, my name's Doug Seltzer. I've suffered from symptoms of HAE most of my life. I recall that it started out at the age of 3 or 4 with, the occasional bouts of abdominal distress. They would last a couple days and maybe happen once or twice a year. Those continued all through childhood and my teenage years and into college. And those were the primary symptoms I had, just the abdominal ones. Occasionally they would, when I was in college, I ran track and cross country, and sometimes hard workouts or races would trigger the abdominal events, and they'd last a couple days. But I just thought it was, just my physiology or something. They started to get worse in my early 20s. They would get worse. They would last longer. They would happen more often. As I started working after college, I would have. It would probably happen once a month. The abdominal attacks, and last again between 2 and 4 days. And I would, tend to work through them. About that time too, I would start to have, these mysterious bouts of extremity swelling, like a hand or a foot. Obviously, they didn't. A hand or a foot swelling doesn't seem to have anything to do with a stomach ache, so I didn't really tie them together. Then at the age of 29, I ended up in the hospital for the first time with an airway event. We thought it was my throat was swelling shut due to some sort of allergic reaction. So that was the first time I actually ended up in the emergency room. At that time, I was referred to a local immunologist in Des Moines, and along with testing me for various allergens, he also tested me for hereditary angioedema. So fortunately, the first time that I actually sought treatment for my problem, I was diagnosed. But the only treatments available were androgens at that time. I went on between the time that I was diagnosed and the time that the treatments were available. I went on to have a number of different hospitalizations, primarily for airway events, and during that time I was intubated 6 times. Those are the attacks I fear the most because those are actually life-threatening, but the ones that impacted me the most were the abdominal episodes. Those were happening more often. I would have at least one a month, probably between, depending on the time, 3 to 10 days of debilitating stomach pain a month. And it affected me most, I think, at that time in my work life. They would happen at inconvenient times. You would, feel that your colleagues couldn't depend on you. They understood the disorder, they understood my disease, they understood the symptoms, But in the back of my mind, when I had to cancel out at the last minute for something, or I was not able to show up for work, it affected me because, I was imagining that they, couldn't depend on me. I also worked for a small business at the time, and it was almost because of my constant trips to the emergency room, it was almost a yearly event that we had to switch insurance companies because our rates would always go up so much. Also, there were times when I couldn't travel or couldn't travel at the last moment, and on several occasions we lost, a bit of business because I was unable to travel. So those, and then when I finally had children, not being able to take part in all the events that, all the activities that kids like to take part in, because again, something would come up for the weekend and I'd be in bed with an abdominal attack. So, overall, I'm glad we have treatments now, but and they're getting better. But as far as my experience with hereditary angioedema, those are the symptoms, the abdominal ones. Even though the laryngeal ones are life-threatening, the abdominal ones are the ones that I think have really impacted my life the most.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kelsey Neary. Is it closer? Hello? Oh. Hi, everyone. My name is Kelsey. I'm 20 years old. I was diagnosed with hereditary angioedema when I was 14 years old. My first memorable attack was when I was 10 years old. I was in the dance studio practicing a routine, and I stopped breathing. And from there, I was taken out of the studio and sent to the hospital with my mom, and diagnosed with asthma and an allergy to ibuprofen. And then I had continued swelling for about 4 to 5 years that was diagnosed improperly. In my freshman year of high school, after I had my tonsils removed for constant strep throat, it was actually just swelling. I began to swell every day. I was unable to attend school. I was unable to partake in after-school activities and dance. So for me, unfortunately, diagnosis with hereditary angioedema didn't bring me relief because I was a child and I have the normal C1 inhibitor. So being young and having that rare form of hereditary angioedema brings additional challenges when attempting to seek out treatments. My worst attack was my sophomore year of high school. I was hospitalized for almost 2 weeks. I had a 19-day attack with no relief, no pain medication. I was just laying in bed in pain for almost a month. And then also, I think it's important for everyone to remember that the symptoms of HAE aren't only physical. I suffered socially. Sorry. And emotionally. It's so hard to live as a kid with this disease. I never thought that I would graduate high school or move on to college. But fortunately, I was able to get on a treatment plan before I left for school, and that seemed to keep me pretty well controlled. And I just want to say that I'm here on behalf of the young kids that can't be here. I'm sorry. I've had the opportunity last weekend to meet with so many young people at the summit that are affected by HAE.
and so many of them are ready to give up. And that's not okay. So I just ask everyone in this room that we push for treatment for kids and research for kids, because I don't want them to live the childhood that I did. It's not fair. Thank you.
Hello, my name is John Williamson. I have suffered with HAE most of my life. I was diagnosed as an infant by the Navy when my mother received her medical discharge due to HAE swelling. While all types of HAE swelling can be uniquely disabling, laryngeal swelling has always been my and every HAE patient's, I think, worst fear. After watching my mother's throat close to the point where she needed to have an emergency tracheotomy in our living room when I was 7 years old, I became very aware of the power that HAE has. I have witnessed most of my family members at one point hooked up to ventilation tubes and tracheotomy tubes. I experienced my first laryngeal swelling and was hospitalized at 16. This fear is something that we think about every day, and often the last thing that we think about at night. So it definitely comes with its emotional and psychological toll as well. Before having access to treatment, there was a lot of physical activities that seemed impossible. I always loved playing sports, but being hit with a baseball can lead you to an ICU visit with facial or throat swelling. Attending school was always hard, not only due to the absences of being sick, the embarrassment of going to school disfigured and swollen, but also the distraction of not being able to focus on your work when you're in so much pain. Missing work has always been an issue. Most employers are not very empathetic to the fact that you're sick, and they don't really understand the severity of HAE swelling. Luckily, my family has always understood when we miss family events due to HAE swelling. Most of the members of my family do have HAE, and it's just something we all share. Having access to treatment has completely changed my life. I'm now able to control my HAE for the most part. I'm able to work. I'm able to live somewhat of a normal life. I'm not forced to live on disability programs. I am able to continue to contribute. So life for me is slowly getting better with HAE. I do still worry because I do still have breakthrough attacks. Even with access to prophylactic treatment and acute treatment, I still had a breakthrough laryngeal swelling in January. I do worry that I will have a laryngeal swelling in my sleep and won't wake up. Or if I do wake up, it'll be too late to be able to treat. I worry about the fast-moving abdominal attacks that disable me and keep me from being able to work, keep me from being able to contribute to my family. Most of all, I really worry about becoming stagnant in my treatment. We need to continue to move forward and progress and continue to strive for better treatments and a better life with HAE.
How many of you in the room heard your experience in something someone said? Wow. Okay. We're gonna have an opportunity to talk a little bit more about that. Does anyone want to give a little?
Hi everyone, my name is Adina. I am an HAE patient, and today is the 8-year anniversary of me being intubated with a laryngeal episode. So at this time, 8 years ago, I was in a medically induced coma, and I legitimately thought I was going to die in front of my mother. And something that kind of resonates with me with that experience is how easy it is to be written off by doctors in emergency rooms and in urgent settings. When I had that episode, I went to the ER, my local college. It was in the middle of nowhere town in Kentucky. And the doctor tried to treat me with Benadryl and tell me to wait. And everybody has a story of a doctor telling them to take Benadryl and wait. And I said that wasn't good enough. And I was sent to a different hospital. So something along with trying to find research for kids and trying to develop effective treatments for kids is also trying to raise awareness with the physicians that we encounter on a too frequent basis. So that's kind of my contribution.
Thank you. Well, I think we have a great basis to begin our facilitation. Chris, could you hit the next? So the next question I'm asking everyone to kind of talk about so we can hear more is, of all the symptoms that you've experienced, which are the ones that have had the most significant impact on your life? And you can choose up to 3. This is that great time where I told you you have to look at the number, watch it disappear, and then pick another one. So it's the watching it disappear is the important part. I want to remind people on the web to respond as well. Slowing down, we're going to give everybody another like 5 seconds. Okay. Chris, can you show us the results? So hoarseness and abdominal pain in this set is the most prevalent, followed by vomiting. I think that's what it says. How does the web look? Is it similar?
It's pretty much an equal split between hoarseness, throat swelling, or difficulty breathing, swelling of the face, and swelling of the tongue, with just one other.
Okay, thank you. So does anyone have a experience with swelling in one of these places that you'd like to tell us about? Okay. All right.
Hi, my name is Lydia. I have a story that I know some others share. I had my first severe abdominal swell as a grown person who actually knew what was going on when I was 18 in college. I had started taking birth control pills like many young girls do, not knowing that that was going to be a trigger for an abdominal swell. So I went to the emergency room in my college town, an hour and a half from home, and was given an emergency appendectomy because no one knew that I had HAE, and that was the best thing they could figure out that was wrong with me. So what they ended up finding was 2 liters of fluid just sort of hanging out in my abdominal cavity. And then my mom showed up and said, "Oh yeah, you were diagnosed with that when you were 8 years old." And I was like, maybe you should have told me that. But that is something that I think we all share, and kind of going back to what Adina said, is going to the hospital, especially when it's new and you don't know what it is, and being completely misdiagnosed. So.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to speak? Thanks.
My name is Peggy, and for the most part, it's just hands. It was started with hands and feet with me. And you think that, well, hands and feet are nothing, but if the bottoms of your feet are swollen, you can't walk anywhere. And if your hand swells up like a balloon, it's like man has opposable fingers, and you can't pick stuff up. You can't like pull up your pants, and you can't do anything, dress yourself, feed yourself when your hands are swollen up. And when your hands and feet are both swollen, you basically can't do anything except just sit there. So you might think, I've also had internal too, but hands and feet more, but they make your life miserable just as well.
Donna.
Thank you. My name is Anthony Castaldo. Picking up on some of the themes of our panel here, I think many of us will identify with the fact that upon arriving at the emergency room and people not knowing what's going on, we're often labeled as drug seekers. And I have the HAE group had a patient summit meeting a week ago. 800 of our best friends were there. It's amazing to see this wonderful attendance here, given the fact that everybody was out in Minnesota just a short week ago. But at the summit, to just leverage off and just further discuss some of the things spoken about here, not only did we hear a tragic laryngeal attack story that just happened not too long ago, but it's really interesting in its ramification because this patient actually knew he was having a laryngeal attack, didn't have access to therapy at that moment for a variety of different reasons, and crudely tried to fashion his own tracheotomy. And luckily, paramedics got there in time, and they were able to save his life. But he actually was arrested by the police and put in for a psych consultation. So, these kinds of things do happen, and this really does show the severity of this disease and how it's still at this juncture very much misunderstood out there in the medical community.
Lonnie, do you have someone?
I'm Jenny Barnes from North Carolina. You'll probably figure that out if I talk long enough. But I want to give you perspective from a caregiver side. My son was diagnosed at the age of 5 at Duke with HAE type 1. He passed away in June 2008 from a laryngeal swell while he was at the emergency room waiting for treatment. And I'm looking at your list there, and we're supposed to kind of prioritize. And I know that kind of gives you a gauge of where you, but as a mom, any one of those things caused him a disruption in his life. He couldn't put his shoe on. The little fellow at 5 years old, I would have to put him in sweatpants because he couldn't get his little pants buttoned. And he would, to your point, Mike, walk around and his face would be just swollen enough on one side to make him look disfigured. And he'd look at me and say, I can't go to school. I look like a monster. And he was in kindergarten. So these are the heartbreaking realities. I am the reality of having been trying to be on top of conferences and doctors and all this. I was involved in everything, and he still died. So that's the reality. But anything on this list is a disruption in your day. Even if they just say other symptoms or 7% of going to the bathroom. Anybody know how profound that is when 7% you can't go to the bathroom? In that moment, that's 100%. So that was the points I wanted to bring up. Thank you.
I appreciate that. We have another person.
Okay, I got the nerve to stand up and talk. My name is Carol Edwards, and we talk about abdominal pain. Boy, when I was pregnant, they said how bad childbirth was going to be. It was nothing compared to an abdominal swell, which it took me 45 years to get diagnosed, so I had no clue what it was. So I'm really realizing today what that pain really has been like. And I never realized it because I was young enough back then to be able to get through it. I'm older now. I can't get through it anymore. I've got to have help each time. The other thing I want to add is that you've got on F, nausea and vomiting. You don't have diarrhea because let me tell you, if it's coming out up one end, it's coming out the other. And it's bad. You can't control it. It's just there. And that's bad because in my luggage, I pack lots of underwear. And it's really not funny because you never know when that's going to hit. You can't make it through it. So I think that's important to have on the list of symptoms also.
Well, thank you. That actually touches on a point. Are there symptoms when we have it kind of other symptoms not listed that you'd like to mention? But before I get to you, I promised you.
Good morning. My name is Tiffany Harvey, and I've been intubated 3 times. The first time I swelled, I was 18 months. I'm sorry to get emotional. Because it's really stressful. It's hard. In 2016, when I was pregnant with my daughter, It was a very difficult pregnancy. I stayed sick the whole time. She was 3 pounds, but I was able to carry her full term. Because of the angioedema, it took a lot out of me. And just recently, just a year ago, I've been on a new medication and it have improved my life tremendously. And just dealing with hereditary angioedema since 18 months, it's really been hell. So I've been through it all. And I think it's very vital that we continue to do the research because it's needed. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Cheryl. I am a hereditary angioedema patient as well as a caregiver because both of my daughters have angioedema as well. The FDA is a data-driven bank of information. I would like to share with you some of my data. I was 11 when I started swelling. I waited 16 years for a diagnosis. I am celebrating my 20th anniversary of having a diagnosis, but I've only had 5 years where I had treatment where I could continue a normal life, if normal is a word that we can even use in this family. In 1 year, I was admitted in the hospital 184 days. A school year, I'm a teacher, a school year is only 180 days long. So 184 days admitted in the hospital. That's not including clinic days, going back and having test results, CT scans, abdominal sonograms, biopsies, the report after they did my surgery and took my appendix out because I was diagnosed with an appendicitis. I have lost 1 child due to abdominal swelling so severely throughout the pregnancy. I have lost 14 jobs because of this disease. I have had 3 deaths in my extended family because of laryngeal attacks. And in 1 month, I accrued $384,000 of medical debt. This has affected my entire life. And this is a disease that I carry physically in my body, but I physically also carry emotional. It's like I've been diseased emotionally as well because of all the things that this has impacted in my life. But another thing I carry as a parent is guilt because now it's my babies. And I'm here today for 2. That's my big number today is 2 because of my 2 daughters. I need more. I'm begging you to go with us to continue this fight because I've truly only lived 10% of my life. Only 10% of my life has been somewhat normal.
Thank you. I'm going to jump in here and I'm going to sound, we have a lot to ask, so we're going to try to keep the discussion points on what the questions are. I think there'll be times to hear all of your experiences, so please don't feel like I'm cutting you. We're going to hear one more person and then we're going to go to our next discussion question, okay? And I'm sure there'll be a time for you to be able to do that.
Thank you. My name is Miles. And my wife has HAE, and as a teacher, I have discovered a couple of students with it. And in one case in particular, I know absolutely it was HAE. Trying to get assistance for that family, trying to get the family to understand what's going on was next to impossible. Educating the school nurse was next to impossible. When she did figure it out, did the research, she was like, there are more kids out there that we need to discover, and we need to discover the kids in the school system because the monster effect that was pointed out is crippling so many kids because they swell up, they feel like they're monsters, and they don't need that. So please help us find and discover these kids because there's a lot more out there than what we have numbers on right now.
Thank you. I don't even know what to say. Your stories and experiences are so moving. Let's get some more questions, facilitated questions, and we can get some more information from you. So, have you experienced one or more attacks involving your throat? Yes or no? And Chris, can you? Wow, 89%. What is the web numbers?
We have just 4 responders. 3 said yes, 1 said no.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to the next question because I think it leads into this. If you answered yes to the previous question, was a breathing tube inserted into your windpipe? So 29% did, 71% of you did not need. Does someone want to talk more? Who would like to share their experience with?
Donna.
Hi, I'm Janet Long. I just want to point out that the question we have to also understand does not cover folks who experienced a tracheostomy instead of a breathing tube or intubation. And it also does not cover those who may have been undiagnosed and did not even know that they had the option of going and having that take place, and were fortunate to actually not have their throat closed all the way. So it is good information, but you also need to know there are other factors.
Okay, well, we'll add that to our conversation as well.
Hi, my name is Brittany Perez. I have HAE. I'm a patient. I had my first swell when I was 7. My main issue is I have a lot of issues with urination because of swelling, and doctors don't seem to understand that. So when you go to the hospital and you try to explain that to a doctor, they don't, and it causes a lot of issues. You start to throw up and your stomach starts swelling, and it causes other issues with your HAE. And so they they stick a catheter in you. When they go to stick a catheter, they tell you to relax, and they tell you, well, you're a woman, you relax, you're making it difficult, you're tensing up, and and it really hurts. And when you try to tell them it's not that, they tell you you're lying. It's not HAE, it's something else. And my one experience is the nurse just shoved it in. And he's like, well, I can't get it in. You're making it really difficult. So you got another doctor, you got someone else, and it took them 3 attempts. And by the 3rd attempt, it just felt like something like a hot dagger just going in. And when they did get it in, they didn't get it in correctly. So they had to keep playing with it just to get the urine out. And then they said, well, they kept asking what HAE is, and I explained it to them, and they wouldn't give me my medicine. which they had on hand at the hospital. And instead, they did sonograms, and they found out there was all this urine retention. I said, well, I'm just holding it. Then it was
sorry.
such an argument. And by the time they got the urine out, they sent me up to Albany, thinking it was because of my back. And Albany told me, well, that I came up for no reason and I wasted their time because there was no urine. They didn't know my uncle sent me. And when they took the catheter out, I was bleeding. And it was just so bad. And I had that problem quite often. I swell from the HAE, and the swelling gets so bad I can't pee for days at a time sometimes, even with medicine.
Thank you for sharing that experience. Thank you very much. You had your hand up.
Yes, this is for the swelling of the throat. I never had it before, and so I didn't know what it was, but I'm lucky that I did have Firazyr on hand, and I thought my throat was sore, and usually, I'm lucky because so far my attacks have started slow and gone slow, and it's like I thought maybe I was getting a sore throat, and usually the sore throat turns into a cold, and after about half a day, it didn't turn to a cold, and so I said, well, I'm always, okay, let me just try Firazyr and see what happens. And I'll be darned, Firazyr works for me within 5 to 15 minutes. And within 15 minutes, it's like I found out it wasn't a sore throat. My throat was starting to swell. And so it's, that really opened my eyes. It's like, wow, that was, if I hadn't have had Firazyr or the options available, then it would have continued up and slowly would have closed off. And I knew I had HAE, but again, the problem is convincing these doctors and convincing the hospitals and stuff because they don't want to hear it. And anyway, so it can be slow, but you can, at least I can control it with the Firazyr, but you have to recognize what it was. And I didn't. I thought it was a sore throat turning into a cold.
Thank you for that. Did you have something you want to share?
Hi, my name is Tina, and I have HAE with normal C1 inhibitor. I've been intubated 3 times. The very first time, they actually had to resuscitate me because they had trouble getting the tube down. I stayed in the medical ICU for 3 days, and this was pre-diagnosis properly. I'd spoken with John's mother, and we felt that I had it, but the testing came back negative. The second time I was intubated, I almost lost my life from a secondary infection of staph pneumonia. But this was all before medications came to market. The very last attack that I had was just 3 years ago. I did have acute medicine, rescue medicine available. However, because I just recently had throat surgery and was still numb, I was a little late in administering the medication. That's why I'm here today. It is very crucial that the FDA continue to fund our research because for me and the type that I have, I only can respond to my attacks after the effect. And so I too want to be able to have a little bit more freedom. Since the medicines came to market, I have had a little bit more autonomy, but I do fear that I will have an attack, that I won't be able to respond in time for. That very first one I mentioned, the only way that I'm here today speaking to you is because I had an alarm that woke me up, and I had just 5 minutes to get to the hospital. So, thank you.
Donna, I have someone.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Diane, and I have HAA1. I began really feeling symptoms when I was in probably 5th and 6th grade. I know in 6th grade I missed 65 or 70 days of school, and it was due to stomach pains. And they would be so bad, I would crunch over. And it first started, the doctor gave me phenobarbital, Then in no time, the next year I was on Librium. Next year it was diazepam or Valium. And the pain just continued. And I didn't get diagnosed really until I was 40. But when I was 18, I had a hemorrhoidectomy, which is not common for an 18-year-old. So about 5 years ago, I was having problems with my sphincter. And she's talking about genital, and I'm talking more rectal. And I have a Medtronic device now in my back. And because of all the swelling in that area with my sphincter, it would go out, it lost its control. And the Medtronic device now does. So I can go to the bathroom as a normal person. But we need to spend so much more time in trying to find other therapeutic ways to help people. Because there is no, when you're having these stomach attacks and when you almost feel like a guinea pig, because it seems like it's always something. Always something. I mean, and like this last week, I had an ultrasound of the stomach, and then they wanted to do I feel like this knife's in me at different times. And it'll happen in the middle of the night. And they want to, the doctors don't understand. I'm a huge advocate. I'm going around to as many hospitals, colleges, especially anesthesiologists. I had an anesthesiologist once. I was going in for something minor, and the anesthesiologist said, I'm not treating that HAE patient. Why didn't anybody tell me? And I stayed calm. He came in, I'm giving you FFP and steroids. I said, no, you're not, sir. I said, the order is for me to have the therapy before surgery. I don't want to. I said, but if you look at the order, I stay calm. I've learned, I try to stay as calm as I can. They don't. Then when he went to infuse me, this is a professional. He goes, A is for after death. B is for burial. C is for cremation. I said, okay, I guess I'll join in. D is for death. E is for eternity. And a lot of patients might not take it that way, but I had to in order to keep myself calm. And we just need to really be able to reach out and educate as many people in the professional world as possible.
Thank you. Thank you. I think I saw a hand over here. Oh, go ahead.
I would just like to add a little bit on the breathing tubes. I spent a majority of my childhood communicating with my mother on a dry erase board because she was constantly intubated, more intubations than I can count. And I think we all know here that there's something extremely terrifying about having to find that right position that you can hold your head just so that you can get enough air in while you're waiting to get to the emergency room. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
So, sorry.
That's okay.
My first experience with HAE was when I was 7 years old, and my stepfather had a throat attack. He was put into a coma for almost 2 weeks. So I guess as a 7-year-old, it was terrifying because he had been in my life for a couple years now at that point, and suddenly he was taken away from me, and I didn't know if he was going to live to see the next day, if I would ever be able to talk with him again. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thanks.
And I'm Carol. And about a year after being diagnosed with HAE, I had a crown done at the dentist. And after going to the dentist, I went to Target to buy some wine because I was going on a cruise, and I'm not feeling too good. And I'm going, no, this can't be a throat attack. I thought I was immune to it because I only had the abdominal kind. We're not immune to it. So I picked out my wine and I said, well, I'm not going to an ER. They'll never believe me. And I went home And that prompted me to be able to go to the doctor and say, maybe I need some meds in case I have a problem. And he said, well, did you go to the ER after, you had your throat swell? I said, no, I wasn't going to go. And he goes, you were really stupid. So I do admit that I can have laryngeal swells, and I'm not immune to it, and that takes a lot for someone like me. So anything can happen with this disease.
Thank you so much. Okay, this will be our last one, then we'll move on to our next question.
My name is Steve, and I am a caregiver. I'm not a patient. Our son is not the patient, it's my wife, is on the autism spectrum, and every time something like this would happen, and it happened a number of times throughout his childhood, he thought his mom was going to die. And so this has always been something that we have been dealing with, and even as an adult, he still struggles with it. And so I just want to echo what so many others have said. This opportunity for research through the FDA, please continue. Please advocate through your local communities and hospitals and physicians. It's really critical, and our son has turned out quite well, but it impacts more than just the patient. It impacts the entire family, and I think it's really important that we're all aware of that and that we continue advocacy.
Thank you so much. I want to give people on the web a chance. Are there any comments that were written that you'd want to?
We're not getting any comments.
Web, what's up? It's me talking to the web, so my back's not to you guys. If you're on the web and you are having issues, please log out and then log back in, and that should help, okay? We do want to hear your comments if you have any on the web, so please go ahead and feel free to write comments. We're gonna go to a next question. Have you ever had an attack that was treated in the hospital? So 95% of you have, and I'm going to ask the second question, then I'll come to you guys, okay? The second question is, for those 95% of you, can you go to the next question? If you answered yes, how many times over the past year have you been in the hospital? 1 time, 2 to 5, or more than 5 times? Well, that was for if you've been, it was if you answered yes to the last question. What was it, ever? Okay. In my mind, I will do a show of hands for 0. How about that? These slides make so much sense when you're talking about them and not living them, so I apologize for that. Thank you for bringing that up. We'll give those answering. Well, I think that tells us the answer there with the 13 people responding. Chris, can you go ahead? Okay, for those of you who were, 38% 1 time, 38% more than 5 times. Wow. How does the web, did we have any responses?
So 3 out of 4 for the question 9 had been treated at some point in the hospital. And for the 4 responders to question 10, they all had been hospitalized between 2 and 5 times in the past 1 year.
Thank you. I'm presuming, but I don't want to do that. We all know that, like, cute little acronym. How many of you have not been in the last year, but previously, right? Okay, thank you. Well, I want to know if anyone wants to talk about their experience. Well, Sometimes I just think it's silly for me to ask the question. I just should say, who wants to put their hand up?
Well, between question 9 and question 10, and because of the work that we have all done together, our lives have improved so much in the last 5 years that question 9 really doesn't apply to my life anymore. And I'm grateful for that, because as a patient that was 184 days in the hospital in 1 year, it has now been 5 years since I've been admitted to the hospital. And that's because of the new treatments, the new medications, an excellent doctor that works with our family, a diagnosis, and finally getting to live that life. So question 9 and question 10, thankfully, apply to the old me.
Here, Donna.
Thank you. I appreciate that kind of clarification. That's good for us to know.
Well, my name is Sally, and I was just going to kind of, to your point, when people ask me like how you live with HAE, it's like it's two different worlds. There's like one before therapy and then one after. So I would say the same thing. Since therapy, I have not been to an ER or a hospital before that. Totally different story.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to someone who hasn't spoken. We'll get back to you.
Hi, my name is Regina. I have hereditary angioedema type 2. I was diagnosed at 35. Nobody in my family has it. I'm the only one. But I just want to say the impact of research for the way hormones affect our attacks. I am going through, I guess, menopause right now, and I've been going through hot flashes. And since September 2nd, I had 10 attacks. 3 in my throat, 3 in my face, and other parts of my body. And with the therapies that we have now, we need more therapies, because when a therapy gets stuck in a place and we can't get another therapy, it's important we have access to things that are going to help us. I'm on a waiting list right now, so I can't even get a preventive medicine right now because of the backup. So it's so important that we keep doing this research and finding out better ways to help us, especially when we're going through different changes of our life. So thank you so much.
I'm going to jump behind you, and I promise you, you are next, okay?
Yes, my name is Denise, and my father had HAE and suffered terribly with it for years. I watched him suffer in bed and agonize so badly that if anybody even sat on the bed, he was in excruciating pain just from the small movement of somebody else sitting on the bed next to him. They told him that it was all in his head. They opened him up, did exploratory surgery, sewed him back up, and then only to have his stitches burst after he swelled because of the trauma from the surgery. My sister and I are the only 2 children my father had, and we both have HAE. I have my oldest daughter, I have 3 girls. She has it, and she has 2 boys, and her youngest son has it. As a child, I mainly had it on my outer extremities. If I would go swimming, snorkeling, just going into the lower depths of the pool, the pressure, wearing a snorkel and a mask, the pinching my lip between the snorkel and the mask would cause my face to swell. I would mow the grass and my hands would swell, that sort of thing. But then when I started having my children, I started having attacks in my stomach. And of course, you can't take any medication. I couldn't take the Danazol, the Danacrin at the time when I was bearing children. So when I finished nursing my youngest daughter, I got on the Danacrin, Danazol, and it changed my life. So I was on it for 32 years, had a wonderful life, could manage. And then here recently I went to the doctor, and he said that my cholesterol was a problem, an issue, and that I would have to get on cholesterol meds. And I didn't want to get on cholesterol meds, so I said, can I get on the Barinert? So I got on the Barinert. I've been on it for about 3 months now, giving myself the IV, and it's going very successfully. But then when we were at the summit, I heard about the HAGARDA, and I'm real excited about that because it's sub-Q. And I'm just so thankful for all the new options that are out there for us. And I'm so thankful for the opportunity to be here today and to plead our case. And I hope that you will listen to us and have sympathy for us and for our needs. And I'm so privileged to be here. Thank you.
Don't want to go back on a promise.
I've never been accused of talking too much, trust me. When I see these two questions, question 9 and 10, and talking about being treated in the hospital, what do we mean by treated? Were we treated with the proper medications? Was something that's not going to work, and was it in a timely manner? And I think it's no for a lot of us. So being treated with the proper way really means a lot. I wish on these the rescue meds or whatever for HAE that they put in needs to be administered in a timely manner. Otherwise, it's really not that effective because you just can't get that across to the medical professionals. And I'm a nurse, and you just can't tell them. They don't care.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to take one more comment, and then we'll go to our next discussion question.
Thank you. I would dare say, though, from some of the comments we have, and even some of the research has been done, notwithstanding, we'll get into this, I guess, when we talk about treatments, but notwithstanding the availability of current therapies, we still do see a fairly significant burden of illness for the reasons that folks have talked about before. An on-demand patient still has the stress associated with whether or not they're going to have an attack, whether or not they're going to be able to treat it in a timely manner. I thought it was very articulate. Some of the folks on the panel talking about if you wake up in the morning, will you wake up? Will you have a laryngeal attack? So I just want to make sure that, yes, we do have therapies, and we'll talk about those. And certainly it's changed many of our lives, but there is still a significant burden of illness out there. I don't want that to be eliminated from our discussion.
Absolutely. In fact, we are actually running ahead of time, so it seems to me that some of you would like to talk about either not treatments because that's this afternoon, treatments this afternoon, but symptoms that maybe we've not talked about or issues. I think I've seen your hand. Let me get you, then we'll come over here.
Hi, my name is Dakota, and actually 5 years ago today, I was diagnosed with HAE. Took me about 6 years to be diagnosed, and through all of this, the other most, I'll say, debilitating symptom is actually mental health. I suffer with depression. I suffer with anxiety, and it sucks. It's not a traditional symptom, but we're afraid of when our next attack will be. We're afraid of how we're going to be treated. I remember before I was diagnosed, I didn't even want to go to the hospital. My pain was 10 out of 10. I didn't want to go. They couldn't do anything, and they were just going to accuse me of drug seeking. Even now, I've been diagnosed for 5 years, and I have a really great doctor, and I still don't want to go to the hospital because I'm afraid of what they're going to say to me. I'm afraid that they're going to say no, and like so many others, die from a throat swell because the doctors don't believe what we have. On a day-to-day basis, I have no social life because I've lost friends who think that I just want to blow them off. And I don't. I want to go out. I'm 25. I want to go to the club. I want to go hang out. I can't because I'm just either in an excruciating amount of pain or I have fatigue. Fatigue has followed me everywhere since I was 14. And I don't have the energy to go out even for lunch or Starbucks. So I have no friends. I failed out of college because I couldn't make it to class. I had to quit my job because I couldn't hold anything. My hands would swell up too much. And working at a fast food restaurant, you need your hands for every aspect. And it's followed me throughout this whole thing. And I'm happy that we have better medications. But now I don't know what I'm going to do with my future because I'm still so afraid that I'm going to go back to swelling twice a week, every week for 2 months straight. Having to go to the emergency room twice a week, every week for 2 months straight. And it's terrifying. And this is the only other symptom besides the abdominal pain and the nausea that has hit me the hardest. Anxiety and depression are real. And the mental health aspect needs to be addressed, at least. Thank you.
Thank you, Dakota. Do we have someone over here? And then we're going to go to the web.
My name is Debbie, and I think one issue that is very common for women is that the disease is often triggered because of hormonal changes. When you are in your teens, you often have your first really bad episodes. For me, pregnancies, and I was not diagnosed until I was past all my childbearing years. It was over almost 40 years before I had diagnosis. So I went through 4 pregnancies, extremely sick, and on all kinds of medications to help with nausea that never worked. My last pregnancy, my 2-year-old went and lived with my mother for 3 months because I could not care for her because I was so sick. And it was that same 2-year-old when she turned 16 and began to have extreme episodes every month that said, "Mama, I'm not going to live the same way you have lived. There have to be answers." We finally got diagnosis. So I would like to see a lot more research about, about the hormonal impacts and how you can adjust medications and things based on where you are in your life hormonally now, menopause, all those different aspects of your life as a woman that severely affect the disease.
Thank you. We're going to go to the web and hear some of those comments, please. Stacy?
So Beth on the web has echoed some of the similar comments that have been presented here in the room, that prior to new medications becoming available, she was in and out of the ER 4 to 7 times a month, and this was a big burden on her life. As well, we have a comment from Crystal, who has shared a story about being in the ICU for laryngeal swelling, and upon being transferred to the floor, her C1 inhibitor was not continued. And after a 2.5-hour delay in getting the medication, the nurse ignoring her, she wasn't able to speak and was worried that she wouldn't live to see her daughter's birthday, which was just 10 days away. So I think has shared similar stories to all of you who have just realized that there's a lack of understanding sometimes in the medical community, and it takes too long to get the medication you know you need.
Okay. Let me get to you.
Dina again, sorry for hogging the mic. Something that hasn't been addressed yet is the relevance of using ports or maintaining vein health whenever you're administering medicine. I was very fortunate to have started a prophylactic treatment in 2009 after my laryngeal episode, and I had a portacath implanted. That port malfunctioned and had to be taken out. I had a PICC line implanted. That PICC line came out. I'm now on my second portacath, and there are other factors to consider when it comes to treating HAE. One thing that could happen is development of like blood clots, and I'm sure all of you are aware, but I think trying to be aware of the method of medication being administered, obviously sub-Q, having a pill a day would be fantastic. Sub-Q is a nice compromise, and the IV is necessary. So I guess, trying to be aware of other things that go into method of treatment.
Thanks. And again, we will be talking treatment much more exclusively in the afternoon.
Hi, my name is Angelica. I just wanted to sort of go off of what she said too, as far as veins and stuff like that. When I was diagnosed, they wanted to teach my mom how to start an IV on me, and that's a burden on a healthcare, for the caregivers and stuff like that. But when a registered nurse can't get an IV and they're poking you 6 to 7 times for one IV, it's so discouraging to be spending 4 hours of your, every 2 days to get this IV put in. And I was attending college for a while with IVs in the back of my hand and in my arm because they were so scared to remove it because they couldn't find another one the next time I needed treatment. They finally decided to put a PICC line in, but being 19 and not being able to shower normally or swim or play sports or really do anything, lifting, anything like that, because some of us can't tolerate ports and stuff like that, and different doctors think different things don't work, and for everyone to be on the same page would be nice, but it's definitely a burden to be 19 and not able to do things because I can't get my right arm wet, and to know that there's new medications coming out that are sub-Q, but some of us aren't approved for it, and I know a lot of people too, not every medication works for them, so it's important that we continue to look for different ways to administer the medication as well as, being able to still live life, because at 19 and trying to explain to people why you have a tube hanging out of your arm is really sort of an awkward conversation to have, that's for sure. But it changes everyone's life, and everyone has to cope with it differently, because a lot of times doctors won't treat you for other things you have going on because they're scared to, interact the medications because they are not very well known. So when you go to see a doctor because you think you have, rheumatological issues as well, and they say, well, we don't really want to kill you, it's really scary. And I think a lot of us in the room can say that maybe HAE isn't our only thing that we have going on medically, but to get a diagnosis, a lot of times doctors just stick every symptom under the umbrella of HAE because there is so much, lacking as far as knowing what symptoms can stem from HAE. I know me personally, I have so many problems with infections, and my white blood cells don't elevate, but they don't know why. They can't figure out what's wrong, and I can't control my body temperature, and there's so many things that I've seen, that I've talked to other patients that we have similar, but it's not considered a symptom because it might not be researched yet. So thank you.
Here we go, Don.
Thank you. Okay.
Good morning. My name is Liz. I have HAE type 1. I had my first attack when I was 9, and I was finally diagnosed at 34 after some unnecessary surgery, many hospitalizations, and much of my life thinking I was crazy, or actually I knew I wasn't crazy, but everybody else thought I was. So the symptom I want to talk about, or the word I want to talk about, is potential. So thank you, FDA, for having this. It's so powerful to get patients in a room. And I hope you just get a taste of what an amazing group of patients we are. And so much of the disease for me has been about not being able to live out my potential. So when I was 18, and I was straight A student, I missed a ton of school. I always made up my stuff. I was, got accepted into some great colleges. And when I was 18, my doctor told me he didn't think I should go to college because I couldn't handle the stress, because my body couldn't handle the stress, which just made me really angry and work all the harder. And I'm proudly have my master's degree from Duke University. And at every kind of stage of better treatment, so once I got my diagnosis, once I got on the modern therapies, now on a drug study, what I've been able to give back to the world at every level is just enhanced, right? So as I get healthier, there's so much I can give back. I'm now proudly the executive director of one of the largest emergency shelters in the Southeast. We provide, emergency shelter and help 350 men every night get out of homelessness. And I could never have dreamed doing this job 10 years ago, because now with the modern therapies and thankfully being able to be on a clinical trial, I can lean into my potential and I don't have to miss those big moments as I did throughout life. And I just get to know the amazing patients in this room and just know the more access we have, the more we're going to give back to this community and to this world. So thank you.
Thank you. I promised her, and then we'll go to you.
My name's Amy. This is my daughter. I'm going to read what I wrote because I'm not really good at holding it together. With a newborn, they tell you about sudden infant death syndrome. For the first 6 months of her life, she slept on the couch with my hand on her back. New mom, you know how it is. Just to make sure she was breathing. No one told me that 25 years later, I would worry every time she sleeps too late in the morning. The fear of what I might find opening her bedroom door and wondering if she had an attack. Wondering if I lost her in the middle of the night. Throat swells and losing her is a great fear. But there's everyday pain in watching what she goes through, the emotional toll and the parts of her life that have been taken. We almost lost her last year, not to HAE, but to an infection. She became septic from the port that she needed to be able to access the medicine. The multitude of ways that we can lose our loved ones and the many ways HAE takes parts of their life from them is vast. We're fortunate that she was able to get onto a clinical trial and it is making a huge difference in her life. But there's drugs in the pipeline that can make an even bigger difference, not only for her, but for all the others. As a mom, I don't have a HAE myself. I don't know what my daughter goes through. I just know the fear of losing her and wanting to do everything possible to keep that from happening to her, to everybody in this room. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Lydia again. I just want to say, first of all, what you said about potential, I think, is something that our entire country should hear when we're debating healthcare and access to healthcare, because while it seems like just a greater expense, it's truly an investment in our country and the people of our country. Moving on, I would like to emphasize what my friend over here said about mental health, because I think that I've seen, I have hereditary angioedema, my mother has it, my brother and sister who are in their early 20s have it. My kids probably have it, thankfully no symptoms yet, and they're 6 and 7. But I think the constant anxiety of not knowing what to expect from your body impacts us probably more than all of that other list, just because you really don't ever know like what to expect. You don't know what's going to make you swell. You don't know how you're going to feel from day to day. Yesterday, I stopped at Nordstrom Rack and spent way too much money on shoes. And this morning, my hand swelled from carrying all my purchases in the plastic bag. So was it worth it? Yes. But, you know, when you're in a constant state of anxiety, it impacts not just what you can do from day to day, but how you feel about other things in your life. When something else pops up that's unpredictable, you've already stacked that anxiety on top of the anxiety you have about just existing. So I think while the disease itself can cause anxiety and probably depression as well, it's also being at that heightened state of awareness and anxiety that makes us even more prone to adding to that problem. So I think that's one of the biggest impacts in my life anyway.
Thank you. What I'd like to do, though, actually is go to the next question, because I think it's going to piggyback on this, and I think some of the comments you have might feed that. So keeping in mind, we might not have included everything that you think we should, and we'll hear about that, I'm happy to say. When you have an attack, What limitations in the activities of your daily life do you experience? And please choose all that apply. And know that that they're going to come back. I want you to think about it, mull it around a little bit. So, okay, great. We have a story to talk about.
So Jennifer on the web has also has hereditary angioedema with normal C1 inhibitor. As was mentioned by a woman earlier, it took a while for her to be diagnosed, and she has had many unnecessary eye surgeries because of this. She also wanted to echo sentiments about the social impact of her disease and how it impacts her relationships in life, and she can feel irritability and other symptoms like that when her attacks are coming on. And she also shared one other story about going to surgery for unnecessary eye surgery during a swelling attack, and the nurse would not get her Firazyr out of her bag, and because she thought she was drug seeking. So again, similar themes running throughout everyone's experiences.
Thanks. I actually have this slide, so I'm going to read you what your choices are. So the first choice is, so this is all that can apply. So A, I cannot go to school or work. B, I cannot participate in family and social activities. Oh, it's not online?
Oh, what happened was the power wasn't plugged, so.
Okay, so let's do this. Let's make the best use of your hands. A, who can't go to work? Yeah, when you're having an attack, what limitations do you experience? So if this happened to you before, can't go to work or school? Cannot participate in family activities, social activities? Cannot participate in sports activities? I would raise my hand, but just because I'm not very good at sports, so. I'm unable to care for myself, eating, dressing, pulling up our pants, as we found out. That was never talked about before. I'm able to care for my children. I feel left out. What else do we have? All of the, of course, well, you can pick everyone. Is there something that's not on this list?
Just a quick comment, and I'll add something to the list. I think the sum total of all we've heard so far this morning, and these stories are so compelling, is that there is significant anxiety. Lydia, you made the case, and many others have, about the significant level of anxiety associated with HAE, and that's even now. And I would dare say that there's researchers have looked preliminarily at sort of the broad spectrum of stress associated with HAE. And I think there's probably eventually we're going to see a link between PTSD and HAE. You can see why as you listen to the stories that we have here. There's another piece of this that maybe somebody might want to comment, and it comes up from time to time, and that is that people also fear passing the gene on to their family members, and as a result, some folks might be hesitant to have children, and that's been something that we've heard about quite a bit in the anxiety spectrum.
Thank you. Okay. Let's go on.
And just to piggyback on what Mr. Casaldo said, I'm a single mom, and my first attack that I spoke about earlier, I'm Tina again, my son was only 4, so he's 15 today. And while I do suffer from anxiety, and I do believe post-traumatic stress probably would be a better suited diagnosis for our feelings, my son also has anxiety. And I believe some of that has came from seeing his mom, his only caregiver, in and out the hospital. And me not sometimes being able to be that stronger person for him to say I'm okay, because I'm also scared. It's heartbreaking to see him get worried as a child when I sleep in sometimes, or if my eye swells and my fears is taking a little time to work. Mom, do we have to go to the hospital? Do we have to go? Where should I go? So that has been very hard on the family, and I do believe that everyone has said that, but my son doesn't have HAE. So it affects our family if they have it or if they don't. And again, one of the things that has been somewhat of a relief to me is having a rescue medication where I can give myself Firazyr and stay home. So I don't have to find a babysitter, or sometimes it requires that my dad comes from out of state and stay with me, because that trip to the hospital for treatment became an intubation or overnight observation that went from 1 night to 5 nights. And so I just thank you guys for having us here to talk about it. But again, it is not just us as the people in the back of the room, our caregivers, our family members, and even my future husband. I would like to meet him one day without being a Looney Tune, so please give us some medicine so I won't have so much anxiety. Thank you.
Diane again. I just wanted to thank the FDA for this, but I want to tell you, my entire biological family are all deceased, but everyone here is my swell family. And I don't think in any other rare disease you will find a group of people that will be so supportive and so motivated to not only help each other, but work with you and you work with us. I'm sure if you call on anyone in this room, we will do whatever it takes to help get solutions.
Thank you.
I think one of the things that nobody's touched on as far as activities that people don't participate in when they've got HAE, a lot of times I think people forego other necessary medical treatment because they're afraid that'll trigger an HAE attack. One of the things I can think of specifically is dental work. I've run into all sorts of people with this disorder that they're terrified to get necessary dental work done because they're afraid that it's going to trigger a laryngeal attack. I know personally, once I started having airway events, I put off dental work to the point where I had a gigantic loose filling on one side of my and a big molar, and I would just chew on the other side of my mouth. And I had a friend say, "Well, when are you going to get it fixed? What happens?" I said, "Well, I can chew on the left side." "Well, what happens if something happens to the left side?" I said, "Well, then I'll just I'll eat soup." But I know when I finally got treatment, and even after that, and I knew the treatment worked well, and even in the past, I'd never had dental work trigger a problem, but just making that first dental appointment afterwards to get everything taken care of, I got off the phone with the clinic, and I was just shaking from, I don't know, stress, terror, worried about what was going to happen when I actually went to get this stuff done. Everything turned out okay. But I know a lot of people that I've talked to are in the same boat. They're terrified to get other things that they're medically necessary done because they're afraid of triggering some sort of event.
I just wanted to comment on the sports and activities thing. I was involved in competitive dance for almost my entire life, 16 to 17 years. And when I was diagnosed with HAE, the reason I wasn't able to partake wasn't because of swelling. I actually felt better when I was exercising. It was because my mom was like, "You're not going to school, you're not going to dance." Like, my parents are both in education, so that was something that we I struggled to understand from them, but I get it now. But when I finally got on a treatment plan and got to college, I tried out for the dance team at my school, and I made it and practiced with them for 4 years, or for 4 months. And after that, the team physician told me that I couldn't participate because I was a liability to the university. So I just want everyone to keep in mind that sometimes it's not the symptoms of HAE that limit participation, it's the other people in the environment that you're in.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Stephanie, and I have type 3, or the normal C1 inhibitor protein. No one in my family has it, and this question is very interesting. When you have an attack of angioedema, what limitations in those activities of daily life do you experience? And what some of you guys have touched upon is like it impacts your life regardless of whether you're having an attack or not. For the dental work, like, yeah, I definitely put that off. Like, no, I don't want to go. Maybe I have a cavity, I don't know. But things like that, scheduling different things, that all impacts you. It limitates my ability to procrastinate like a normal student. I always try to get all my assignments done as soon as I can, as soon as they're posted, so that just in case I have an attack, you know, I'm prepared. A lot of other things, that's just one example, but you know, just it limits your life when you have an attack or when you're not having an attack, and the anxiety is real, and I know a lot of you feel that way. Anytime I get a cold, a flu, it's not just, you know, you're normal, I have a sore throat, Steffi knows, it's okay. Now I have all that, now it's walking pneumonia, and I have throat attacks, and I have everything else that goes on with that, and I know a lot of patients relate to that as well. So it definitely affects your all aspects of your life. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we have one more.
One thing that none of the patients have touched on yet, I'm going to be a little brave here. Physical intimacy is also affected. You know, we talk about, you know, whether it's your kidneys or your hands or whatever else, but when your partner and you and your relationship are also affected by it, and you're afraid to have a relationship with your partner for fear of swelling shut. And then that leads to a yeast infection or another trip to the doctor or possibly an awkward pap smear just because I love my husband. It's hard to put that into words and try to explain it. In a way, this disease has turned me into a liar. It was easier to say that I had been stung by something than to try to explain this. Or to say that maybe I had the stomach flu instead of explaining HAE. Or to say, you know, I had bronchitis. Or come up with any other thing to explain that sounded normal that other people had heard of, because we don't look sick. If you were not having a facial swell, or if they couldn't see the swell, I didn't seem sick. So I would lie about what was happening to my body to make it okay for everyone else around me so they could deal with it. I don't know if other patients did that, but that's one of the things that goes with our disease. Another thing I never thought I would have to face is my 2-year-old, and well, at that point 2, and thank the Lord she is 7. We've lived through 5 laryngeal attacks already. But when she was 2, she sat with us through training to learn how to do an IV. And when your 2-year-old says, yeah, it's red in the line, we got a good one. What 2-year-old should have to live like that? But she also realized that that red in the line, yeah, we got a good one, could save her life. And when you celebrate that in her tiny little veins, you got a good one. The other thing is that you swing the pendulum as a parent that has children with HAE. You swing in this pendulum from absolute dread of the next attack. And then when they've been diagnosed and they don't have an attack, I have a friend who lives in dread every day thinking, when will the first one occur? I've lived through the point now that I celebrated when my children did have an attack because I knew that they knew their bodies, could tell me what was happening, and now I have witnessed my child who is 13 advocating for herself in a doctor's, in the emergency room actually, and being able to stand up for herself at 13 and say, that is not my treatment. I will not take steroids. This is my treatment, and here's the telephone number from my doctor. And then she has the wherewithal at 13 years old to say, I am not doubting you as a physician. I am doubting your knowledge of my disease. This is my treatment, and you will do what my doctor says.
Thank you. Well, it's getting close to our break for the first half. FDA panel, do you have any questions that you'd like to ask of any of the participants?
First off, I want to thank everyone, all of you that are in the room, for traveling all the way out to White Oak and sharing such personal stories. It is very valuable information. I know I speak on behalf of all of my colleagues that we really do appreciate it. We've heard from several folks about your triggers. We heard about the Nordstrom shopping spree. We also heard about hormones, the dental visits, but I think we'd be interested to hear from folks if there are several other triggers that we may not have talked about already this morning. I see several hands going up.
So one of the other things that's a trigger for, I've seen in a lot of people, is anxiety or stress. Creates this, big whole runaround that never ends. And the other one that I have found for myself is the change of weather. If the barometric pressure changes, I swell and I'm in bed. I'm down for the count. I can't get out. I have no energy. And when we did a summit in Denver, a lot of us were swelling and having difficulties because the barometric pressure was different than the other 49 states. So those are two that I know of.
Hello. Someone had mentioned about pap smears. Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Fran Bomar from Alpharetta, Georgia. I'm not embarrassed to have that on the web. We talked about having a pap smear, and that is, it's traumatic just to think about it, but unless the physician is skilled, you can leave, and know that you're going to have an attack. The other is a mammogram, better known as the breast press, because it is so painful. And my husband Ken had asked me one time what was so bad about a mammogram, and when I explained to him, it was a whole different matter. So I have had an attack from having a mammogram, and when your chest swells up, that's not a good thing, and you can't breathe. So those are the kinds of things, along with everything everybody else has said about anxiety and even having commitments. I mean, I'm long retired, and at this point, people say, well, why don't you volunteer for this and volunteer for that? I don't want to do it because they can't count on me, even though I'm on treatment and I have, I do have breakthrough attacks, and sometimes I'm just not in the mood to do it. I just don't have the energy to do it. So, there are other factors out there too. So I agree with everybody else. And yes, I'm missing parts as well, appendix and other things that people decided to take because they didn't know what was going on. So thank you very much.
So we'll let Lonnie's person go first. You, sorry. And then you.
My name's Peggy, and it's not just stress and anxiety, but it's any, like, it can also be happy things. Like you're so excited about something, you're surprised about something. It's emotions, either if I'm really happy about something or if I'm really mad about something. It can, they used to call it hereditary, neurotic, angioneurotic hereditary angioedema, because it was like all in your mind, and that's a lot of people, they have stuff. It's like, and it is. This disease is a bridge between Western and Eastern medicine in a way. The mind can very much affect the physical symptoms, and I don't think sometimes the drug companies and everything get that. It's when we smile, there's chemicals that go on that do things. So it's just not stress and anxiety, which are a great part, but it's also the opposite spectrum too.
One of the things to Lois Perry, Fresno, California. One of the things to remember too, growing up, I had this same problem. Everybody would ask, everyone would ask, why did you swell? Sometimes we don't know. The fact that I don't have enough working or functional C1 inhibitor is enough to make me swell. A lot of times I had no idea. And that was part of the stigma, especially since my dad died so young. My mom always wanted to know, what happened? What happened? You don't always have an answer, but you swell.
Thank you. We're going to take about 2 more because then it's 11:31 now.
One of the things that I definitely wanted to touch on was, I know for me, infection is a huge trigger. The second I get any type of, even viral or anything, it triggers something to happen. And that was actually how I was diagnosed when I was in my senior year of high school. I was homeschooled for 6 months because I had a sinus infection. And to tell someone you're homeschooled because you have a sinus infection, you sound absolutely awful. It's just, sound like a baby. But every time I would, the infection would flare up, my face would swell. And then the doctors thought it was such a bad infection that they started doing surgery because they thought the swelling was from the infection. And a lot of times I know that like the triggers sound simple, but it can create an awful cycle of like hormones, and then you end up stressed because you don't feel well, and then you swell, and then you're stressed because you're swelled. And I think a lot of us get in a pattern of, infections, and then doctors trying to treat it with, medications. And I know that there's some people that have problems with certain antibiotics that cause, as a trigger. And then, like she said, sometimes people are like, well, why'd you swell? And you're like, well, I don't know, maybe because the sky's blue. You really can't explain what is going on in your body because it just happens when it wants to.
Thank you.
Hi, Lydia again. Just to kind of clarify on the Nordstrom shopping trip, what that trigger was is soft tissue trauma, which was not a large trauma, but any little thing for me, like to my body, that is traumatic to my soft tissue can make me swell. For example, I don't know how many people with children have ever been face bopped by your kid coming up when you're going down to kiss them or whatever. I've had numerous facial swells because of that, just getting little tiny conks in the face from my kids. If I am gardening or something, if I'm pulling weeds for too long, that always makes my hands swell. Holding a rake is not possible. I can hold it, but there's no raking. My husband still thinks I'm just trying to get out of something. But oral surgery is a huge trigger for me. When I was in college, just always around exam time, I would swell from that emotional stress. After college, I thought that I needed to have 2 full-time jobs, and that was a bad idea. That caused swells, basically the fatigue. So it can be any number of things.
Okay, we're going to have 1 more, and then we're going to cut.
Hi, I'm Katie. One of the things that can happen is just repetitive motion, so just walking. And usually I can control it by wearing sneakers, and I've gotten to where even if I know I'm going to be doing a lot of walking wearing sneakers, within a couple of hours I can start an attack, whether in my feet or in my knees or in my hip, just from the repetitive motion of walking.
Thank you, everybody. And I know there's so much more, so many more triggers that we could hear. Okay. Ross, go ahead. No lunch for you.
Along
No triggers, no
along the
triggers.
lines of repetitive motion, one of the web participants mentioned if they were driving a car over a road that had been resurfaced where it was graded. Also, one participant mentioned textures of food and also things that are very salty or acidic foods like tomatoes or vinegar based.
Thank you. I feel like we covered so much. I hope I didn't cut off any of you guys, right? We're going to ask you to come back at what was going to be 12:30, but I'll give you to 12:34, but we're going to start right on time. And in the afternoon, we're going to hear about your perspectives on treatment and clinical trials. And I think we'll probably continue the line like what we've been talking about. And again, thank everybody on the panel so much for sharing your experiences. Thank you for being so willing to share. We are so thankful. And I don't promise that lunch isn't great, but I love it. So that's all I'm saying. That might say more about me than you, okay? Thank you. We'll see you in about an hour.